Welcome to the Open Era Podcast. My name is Devang and Simon. I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Simon Bushell. Bush, we continue to wrap up 2022. I was remarking the weather in Toronto is getting quite squirrely, and you just had to mention that it's 20 degrees in Barcelona, where you currently are. I hate you.
Well, there's one way to enjoy the Christmas period is by going away and getting some much needed sunshine. It was absolutely mandatory, I think. If I was going to spend any time in Britain, I got to do the British thing and get the hell away from there as soon as possible.
You did your own Brexit. You did it the proper Brexit, and that means individually leaving. The UK and Spain this time of year, pretty majestic. I am jealous, sir. And it's a good thing that you are in Spain, because we're going to do a whistle-stop tour of our favorite matches this year as we continue to count down the days till 2023. A ton of stuff to choose from, Bush, and we are assuredly going to miss some things that people will probably be like, how did you miss this? Or are you insane? But it's a long year, and that is my main defense. There are a lot of good matches.
Well, yeah, and it's about how we define best matches, good matches. I think their own personal favorite matches, to be honest, or matches which stayed with us, because if we're actually doing an objective quantitative or qualitative list of, you know, the best matches of 2022, then maybe these ones would appear on it. But in general, I think these are just matches which have stayed with us. So I think that's kind of what we wanted to tackle today on today's show, which is that I have one, you have one, and then I think we try and have both picks, as in the sense that we both have one that we should probably talk about together. Sound good?
It does. I'm curious how you, what was your criteria for selecting these matches? Because I went through, I love going on the wiki, the year and like the tour. So like if it was last year, 2021 WTA tour, and going through every tournament and seeing the draws and seeing what I remember or what clicked in. And that kind of is what led me to select the matches I did. But I'm imagining yours is maybe more an emotional appeal, less than sorting through Wikipedia pages.
What are you implying with that statement?
I don't know, to be honest, but however you are taking it, that's kind of where I was taking it.
I operate on vibes alone on this podcast. You've known it for a long time. There's never any actual analysis that's done on this show, and nor should there be. So yes, you're probably right. Emotional appeal. And, you know, I think longtime listeners of this show know that I'm a big fan of storylines, big fan of narratives. And I think that's where I ended up making my decision on this particular match that I've chosen, because it was narrative central. There was all sorts of things going into this one. And like, I'm quite excited to talk about it, because we didn't talk about Carlos Alcaraz in our year-end awards show. He got the short shift, did he not? He didn't get any awards from us.
He didn't. I think he officially got the most improved player from the ATP the other day. But
Jesus,
we neglected him. I think we talked about him a few times, though. And it's not like we haven't talked about him a lot throughout the year. That being said, Bush, I think this is a great choice for your pick. And I will say, at the time, I was in Las Vegas for a bachelor party. And you can imagine the shenanigans that possibly go on at a function like that. But to get an entire group of lads, as they say, to stop the chicanery and watch a tennis match is pretty rare outside of the tennis obsessed. But that's what happened for this match. We all stopped what we were doing. There is a TV outside by the pool. It was picturesque, and we all settled in for Novak Djokovic versus Carlos Alcaraz in Madrid.
Could you describe said laddish behavior to me? What kind of things?
Okay, so we are all washed now. We're all in our 30s plus. So there is way less. It was quite chill, actually. But there's events, you know, golfing and go-karting. There's things to do. And yet this tennis match was one of the highlights of the trip for me, which says a lot.
It's a mark of how committed you are to the sport and to the podcast, that despite being in the middle of a lad's holiday, you still managed to catch up with the ascending star that was Carlos Alcaraz against the fading star that is Novak Djokovic? Question mark? Nah, that's far too harsh.
I will say, Bush, as well, this was a great glimpse into how hard it is to find stuff on American TV or find tennis on American TV. It was quite a mission. And it involved multiple streams and multiple ad blockers, but we found a way.
So I'm going to set this up in the only way I know how, which is by a massive amount of thievery and theft to go and take Steve Tignor's headlines from the following article written about this match. The semi-final between Carlos Alcaraz and Novak Djokovic in Madrid was the most anticipated first meeting of the ATP season. Okay, check so far. I think that's relatively uncontroversial, although we can get into that in a second. It pitted the current number one player versus the teenager who most people believe will occupy that spot at some point, possibly very soon. It featured the defending Roland Garros champion versus one of the top two-tier contenders for that throne in 2022. It was a chance for the young player to show that he could be a worthy successor to Djokovic and Rafael Nadal by becoming the first person to beat them back-to-back on clay in front of his home fans to boot. I think that, in a nutshell, is why this was so interesting. One of the first points that I was going to ask you about this, is that first sentence accurate? Was this more anticipated than Carlos Alcaraz's matchup against Rafael Nadal?
That's a great question. I guess in a way it was, because Nadal was dispatched the way he was. And it was maybe a chance for us to be not overly critical, but ask, okay, can you follow that up? Can you do it again against the other best player in the world?
I think that's probably fair. Also, I guess, just to be fair to that article, it was talking about first ever meetings, and we saw how well Carlos Alcaraz's first meeting with Rafael Nadal went. It was not a pleasant experience for the young man from Murcia. Anyway, let's talk about this match, because the backdrop against it is that obviously Alcaraz has had an incredible season to this point. He won his first Masters title in Miami. He made the semifinals in Indian Wells. But going into this Madrid Open, he had one hell of a draw. And I remember I was talking about on this show, actually, of just what a gauntlet it would have to be for him to go through it and actually take this title, just given the surface and given the home crowd, and just given as well how formidable the opponents that he would have to beat along the way would be. So he opens this tournament in certainly not blazing style, but he has to see off Blashlashvili, which comes with its own problems in its own right. Then he has to play killer Cam Norrie, which he sees him off in 3 very tight sets, and you're not going to get anything easy against Cam Norrie. And then you get that quarterfinal matchup against Rafael Nadal, which, if we're talking about storylines and headlines, Nadal's won everything at this tournament. He owns it in so many ways. And then to have this young Spaniard come up against him, I guess, what are your memories of that quarterfinal? Because I could have easily picked that match as a match of the year because of the own storylines that went into that. But I can talk about why I picked the Djokovic one instead. But let's just give a couple of minutes to that quarterfinal, because in its own right, it was spectacular.
Yeah, I think I just remember expecting Alcaraz to fade in that third set. Mm-hmm. I truly thought that he was cooked. And after Nadal convincingly took the second set, and also I think wrestled some of the crowd support back, because I think that may be the most fascinating aspect of these two matches back to back is Federer gone, Nadal, Djokovic, maybe Djokovic less so. I know there's some places where he's not overly loved, but for the most part, they have the majority of fans behind them. And I think that is something that, in Novak's case, maybe it's not a positive thing because he seems to thrive off anti-support, but it was jarring to me to see Nadal play second fiddle for that opening set, and to see Nadal push back and kind of reassert himself as the man, quote unquote. I expected the third set to follow a similar script to their first meeting, and it didn't. And I saw something from Alcaraz that day that maybe it confirmed for me, and I think we said this at the time as well, Bush, it confirmed for us that a major was coming sooner than later, and no stage was too big for him, even at this age, even at this early juncture in his career.
I think the reason that I wanted to circle this tournament specifically is because I think this is the moment that he arrived. Everyone's going to circle that Grand Slam and say, this is the crowning achievement, world number one, all that sort of stuff. But this is a tournament that really said to me that he was capable of being the best in the world, just given the way that he handled his business against just elite level players, like the route that he had to get to the final, who he had to beat, and then just the utterly and completely comical way that he dispatched Alexander Zverev in the final is one that we'll come on to in a second. I guess I'll ask the other question. If people look back at this year for Carlos Alcaraz, do you think the memory they're going to have is of that US Open win? Or do you think it's going to be of these 2 matches in a row? Because to do this in a way that very few players have done, almost like the list is tiny, isn't it? It's like 4 players or something that have actually managed to beat these two in a row at a Masters or an elite level competition. And to do that at 19 is just an astonishing achievement.
Yeah, it's a good question. I maybe it's because of who he played in the US that won't resonate as much going forward, even though it should probably. And I mean, the Sinner match itself was an all-time classic, but it ended at like 5 a.m. So I don't know how many people were watching that live at the point. It sounds weird to say this, but like I feel like the general spotlight of the tennis world and beyond would seek out that Madrid tournament more than the US Open when it's all said and done. And Sinner and Francis Tiafoe and Casper Ruud did their best to make that US Open run memorable. But I will still look to Madrid as maybe the defining moment for Carlos this year.
Agreed, entirely. And I think one of the things that stands out for me in both of these matches going back to back is just the expectation that we've seen over the year of having a young player come up, play against these two, phenom, just these horrible figures who loom over our sport in the way that they do. And you've seen so many players fade, or like they've had good first sets and they've had good opening matches against either of these dudes and they've just faded. And I think it's important that we kind of circle here is that in the biggest moments in both of these matches, he didn't fade. He still went for his shots and he still hung in there in ways that we haven't seen from other players who are at the top of the sport. I think the only person that I could say that actually rivals Carlos Alcaraz for ability to hang with these two dudes is probably Dominic Thiem in the modern version of the game. And we've seen how it basically took Thiem's entire physical being.
Body. His entire being. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Thiem because he's one of those guys that has beaten Rafa and Novak at the same tournament. But in terms of back-to-back days, can you name the list of people who have beaten them?
Oh, I assume Federer's done it.
Federer has 2010 ATP finals. The other 3 are hilarious, and you might be able to get them, but they're pre-2010.
So Nalbandian's obviously one of them.
Yes, in Madrid, of course, a tournament we talked about.
Tournament. Yeah. 2 other players. It's going to be some random dude, isn't it? Maybe did Schwartzman do it? Someone like that?
He did not. It's an American and a Russian.
Maybe Danny Medvedev did it?
Pre-2010.
Oh,
so
pre-2010,
the original Russian post-Kafelnikov, if that is a hint at all.
The original Russian post-Kafelnikov. Who am I missing here?
The bald assassin, flattest backhand in the world.
Of course. Andre Agassi. No, I'm kidding.
It's Davydenko. It's Nikolai Davydenko in Shanghai, 2009. And then A-Rod, the visored one, Andy Roddick in Dubai, 2008. When, let's be fair here, those guys were not nearly at the peak of their powers then, but still a hilarious list to look back on.
That is a really amazing list. I did not know that Andy Roddick did that. That is actually quite funny. I should go back and watch that tournament. Maybe I should have picked that for my... Maybe we should do that as a look back at some point to give A-Rod his due. So let's chat about this one, because we can't mention this match without mentioning the other narrative, of course, is that Novak Djokovic has played very, very few tournaments coming into this. He's fresh off winning the Serbian Open in Belgrade in his home tournament. But that's kind of it. Like, he's not done a whole lot else in this tournament in this year for obvious reasons, self-inflicted wounds. So I think that's one of the other narratives going into this matchup, is just how is Novak Djokovic going to look after so much time off? And let's be honest, he definitely had COVID around this time as well. Or he definitely suffered with the aftermath of long COVID, just given his staring at the floor and staring into the nether regions of the world blankly between sets that was happening around this period of time. And that is another huge part of this matchup that we can't ignore, Dev.
No, we can. And it's interesting looking back that Novak seemed like he was going to cruise to win this match. Like, he was down early in the first set, but took that over. And even in the second set, he had plenty of chances to end it before a third set even began. But usually you see Nadal and Djokovic's opponents maybe not wilt, but their confidence certainly does, and their shot making suffers as a result. And I think the most fascinating aspect of this match and the Nadal match is Alcaraz is a He's a fine margin player. He goes for big shots, but he reined it in several times throughout to keep himself in points and keep himself in dicey situations. Like for someone who fell behind on his serve as much as he did against Djokovic, to fight back and to make it to that tiebreak in the third set was exceptional stuff.
I think that third set is one of the best sets of the whole season, just everything that happened in it. And I think it's testament to the fighting qualities of Novak Djokovic. Carlos Alcaraz forced 6 breakpoint opportunities in that third set, and Djokovic saved every single one of them. Do you want to take a guess? I don't think you have this in front of you. How many winners and unforced errors do you think the pair of them hit during the course of this match? Let's go with Djokovic first, because that's a much easier, it's a much lower number to guess here.
I want to say 20.
So he hit 23 winners and 24 unforced errors.
Yeesh.
So actually relatively high for a dude that doesn't tend to be, let's say, too adventurous in his shot making. Now, Carlitos, winners, how many do you think it is?
Just from memory alone, I want to say like 60, but I think 40-ish.
So 51 winners.
Jesus Christ. The forehand, man. The forehand was an absolute weapon and sometimes a liability. But I mentioned reining it in. There was times in that match where you felt like he was going for broke maybe too much. And when you were yelling at the screen to stop doing that, he did. And for a young player, it's just so rare.
I believe he hit 37 winners on his forehand side, which is pretty ridiculous over the course of a 3-set match. He also hit 50 unforced errors. So if we're looking at this objectively, he hit more winners than unforced errors. Therefore, keep doing what you're doing, kid. No issues here at all.
It's exactly true. Exactly true. I do have the numbers in front of me now. And I mean, the backhand wing, where do you net out with Carlos on that? Because I think staying in backhand to backhand rallies with Djokovic was also a huge, huge factor in this match.
I mean, he just has to stay neutral throughout his career, doesn't it? It doesn't need to be a weapon, just given he has the biggest forehand on tour, maybe. Is that fair? At least one of them in the top 5, right? Of just ability to shot make, to find winners from ridiculous angles, and just to end points when he wants to. And I think as long as his backhand remains a net positive, and to be honest, like, you don't get to world number 1, you don't hang in rallies with Novak Djokovic with a subpar backhand. Like, I think there's still room to grow on that wing, but the fact that he's able to do what he does and has done so far in his career illustrates that it's more than just like neutral. It's a very, very good shot already.
Truly. And I think it's one thing to say it's neutral against your rank and file tour opponents. It's another thing to stay neutral against Novak freaking Djokovic. And I mean, Novak, I think he had 9 winners on his backhand in this match, even over 3 sets. That's low for him, I feel like.
Indeed so. So Alcaraz comes out the winner. The final score of the match is 6-7, 7-5, 7-6. It's really, really damn close. And even to get over the line, there's times in this that you just feel like Djokovic has too much. He's just like had too much experience to see it out, and just to see Alcaraz answer the bell the way that he did numerous times. And that, if you're looking for an illustration of why he is the world number 1 now and why everyone's so excited about him for the rest of his career, just watch his forehand throughout this match. It is a gun. It is such a weapon. It is just astonishing to watch the way that he's able to produce power from the positions that he's in. And he's a phenomenal athlete. It's a great match to watch, and I'm happy to pick it as my favorite of the year because it's so damn cool to see someone come along and do this to both of these dudes the way that he did.
100%. And I, like you said, like Novak probably not at 100%, and you don't see him giving away the amount of free points he did in that third set, and especially the breaker. Like missing long on a backhand is not something you're used to seeing from him. But on the Alcaraz side, like, he served extremely well in the third set. He was phenomenal at net. At that point, as Tigdor notes, he was 10-2 in tiebreakers. He gets better when it gets tighter. Again, he's 19 years old, man. He's 19. It's just, what a moment. And I felt like the crowd was special. The atmosphere was special. It felt like a signature win and a time that we will look back on many years down the road as a significant moment in men's tennis for sure.
Let's just close very briefly by saying it was hilarious watching the final. It was just Absolutely hilarious to watch a player be so out of his depth and to be, I think, to walk on a court wholeheartedly believing, in the case of Alexander Zverev, that he could beat this kid, stick his chest out, and then just get absolutely pummeled inside of an hour and a half. It was incredibly entertaining and cathartic.
I was extremely worried that after beating Nadal and Djokovic, Zverev would win this tournament. How much does Alcaraz have left in the tank? Would he be comfortable resting on his laurels after getting these two huge wins and maybe succumbing to time on court and everything else? But no, it was a pummeling. It was a justified pummeling. It was something that I think we all love to see. And the new king had arrived in Madrid, a special moment in men's tennis, as I mentioned. When we come back after the break, we go back to the ATP one more time. We're going to hit the WTA in our final section for a bunch of matches, because frankly, I think the WTA was the more exciting tour this year. But I'm going to take us back to Australia in part 2, coming up next. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast, doing our year-end roundup. We've given out awards. We've sang the praises of Iga Swiatek. We're now looking back at our favorite matches of the year. Simon rightfully choosing Carlos Alcaraz defeating Novak Djokovic in Madrid as his choice. For my choice, Bush, I'm going back to Australia, the Australian Open, which I think suffers from being so early in the year that it's often forgotten and its importance is taken for granted. I don't know if you feel the same way as I do, but I intentionally, I think, go back to January and February and comb through it to see what actually happened, because like I said, a ton of matches happen throughout the year and it's easy for the beginning of the season to maybe get lost in the mud.
I wonder whether or not it's true as well that we do get more high quality matches at the Australian Open, just given that it's the first tournament of the year and you've had a bit more of a chance for people to rest as well. Like, people have taken the opportunity to take whatever this tiny off season we have in tennis. And let's be honest, a lot of players just, they phone it in after the final major in the US Open at the back end of the year. And I think that means that you get a ton of really good stuff at the start of the calendar. And I think it's our favorite Grand Slam for a reason, is because you get so much good stuff in that 2-week period.
You really do. And I wonder as well if the tennis took a backseat this time because the Novak debacle, and it felt like the sideshow kind of took over everything. But I'm picking Rafael Nadal beating Daniil Medvedev in the final as my ATP match of the year. I feel like this is such a sliding doors moment, Simon, that it has to be remembered as such. It features Rafa Nadal at a tournament in which he's had success, but more often than not, some crushing defeats. And to the point so where I found the discourse surrounding Rafa a bit hilarious throughout the tournament. You had the Nole fans claiming this is not real, this is fake because Novak's not here. How can this be a true match of the best in the world if the number one player isn't there? But also, it was extremely hard for him at several points, including against Denis Shapovalov in the quarterfinals. Like, I fully believe that he would lose several times in this tournament. And it's not just against the likes of a Shapo or a Berrettini, but maybe even a Karen Khachanov. Like, it felt like this was a special moment in time for one of the best to ever play the game. And to become the fourth man after Emerson, Laver, and Novak to achieve the double career Grand Slam, it was the way he did it, I think, that will go down in the books for me as a truly special moment.
Well, one thing that we also have to acknowledge here, he was going over 21. I mean, if you want to talk about narratives and storylines, it was going against history as well, not just going against Danny Medvedev. It was him cementing himself as the greatest player of all time, question mark. Certainly in terms of the Grand Slam count. Yeah, like, and it's one of those things that it's easy for us to look back now and think it all seems so quaint, just given where the number that these two dudes are probably going to end up with, that mark to get over the 20 to the 21st. I think growing up we never thought we'd see a player hit 20, and then we saw 3 players do it. And then we never thought we'd see players get over 20, and now we've seen 2 players do it. And I think that's just testament to how good they are. They keep rewriting the record books, because this was not an easy tournament for him in any capacity. And he, much like Alcaraz in the previous segment we were talking about, kept answering the bell. He looked down and out so many times in this tournament and still managed to find a way to win it.
Well, consider this, Bush. And this was covered in a wonderful recap article in The Guardian by Tumani Carriol, who we've mentioned several times on this show, exceptional tennis writer. But coming into this tournament, Simon, he hadn't played in 6 months because of that foot injury. He had COVID in December, in which a bad case of COVID. It's bad enough that it felt like a lot of things were in doubt in terms of January. He was the 6th seed. He's 35 years old. It begs relief. And I think the other thing is Daniil Medvedev was the best player in the world at that moment. This is your reigning US Open winner. He looked better at this tournament than he did there, I thought. Mm-hmm. I thought it was one of the best performances to that point, 2 sets into the final, that I had seen at a major in a long time, which makes what happens next even more unthinkable. It
was shaping up to be a crushing, much in the way that Danny Medvedev saw Novak Djokovic in that US Open final in straight sets. You really thought we were going to watch the same thing here, in a cementing of a world number 1 ranking of the dude, of the man, of the ascension to the top of the sport, and to continue his dominance of the field in the way that he had. Didn't work out that way. And there was signs, I think, during the course of this tournament that maybe he was beginning to crack. And I know we're reading something into this, but lest we forget, of course, this is the tournament of the Danny Medvedev, Stefanos Tsitsipas continuation of the fight in the semi-final as well, where the infamous small cat episode happened in the rant that Danny Medvedev had with the umpire. It wasn't all smooth sailing for him either. And I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into this to say that you could sort of see signs that he was fallible, and that actually turned out to be very, very true in this match.
Considered Rafa probably should have won the second set tiebreak. He was up 5-3, serving. He was serving for this, at 5-3, and then in the tiebreak as well at 5-3, he was leading. But in the third set, Nadal serving down 2-3 at love 40. You thought that was it. Absolutely thought that was it. And I think that's when you had the crowd play a role, Medvedev's, I'm not going to say temper, but ability to be rattled come into play. And you had Nadal seize on all of these things and produce some of the classic vintage Rafa stuff we know. Standing on top of the baseline at times, backhands, outmashing Medvedev, who's just exceptional on that wing as well. We talk about Roger being a wonderful front runner and how well he plays when he's confident and comfortable. I feel like Rafa down and out is one of those things in this sport that is unparalleled. Because I think Novak has a bit of this as well, and you never really feel safe no matter what the score is against him. But when Medvedev goes up 2-0, and we've seen Rafa struggle throughout this tournament, fitness-wise and health-wise, even then, it didn't seem out of the realm of possibility that he could come back and win this match. And I look at the Chapo match, and I also look at Medvedev being pushed as far as he did by Felix Auger-Aliassime in the quarterfinals as maybe a harbinger as well, that he was fallible. And even though he did have a 2-0 lead, it wasn't exactly perfect. And not being perfect against Nadal is a recipe for a loss, frankly, because at love 40 in that third set, Bush, how do you not win that game? What happens there? And I guess what happens is you're against a Titan who figured out a way just to get enough to beat the guy that was going to be number 1.
It's pressure points, right? It's pressure points and the ability to convert and get across the line in those situations. And I think it is one of the things that is maybe difficult for defensive counterpunching players, is when you're on pressure points and you're not oftentimes going for winners. You're waiting for your opponent to miss, or you're trying to put them into a position where you're forcing an error from them. It's sometimes hard. You're not quite, it's not the same as going for broke, is it? That's not your game, and that's certainly not Danny Medvedev's game as well. So in those moments, you potentially could say it's harder for him to get across the line in those situations. One point that we should make about this as well is just the sheer bloody length of this match, start to finish. The YouTube video for this match is 5 hours and 41 minutes long. And that's without any of the pre-roll or anything. This thing lasted for bloody ever.
It crashed our producer Dylan's computer when he tried to download it for the sound. That's all you need to know. Just a slog, an utter slog. And my question as well, Bush, because in my research for the show, I was doing some best of lists and looking at how often time is a factor in that. And like the length of a match is usually underlined as why that match is so special, which I don't always agree with. And I think there's just some long slogs that don't include necessarily great tennis, but a tactical battle that truly results in some long grinding rallies. I think you feel similar. Length doesn't equal good.
I completely agree with you. I feel like I'm a broken record when it comes to this stuff as well, is that, yes, length does not equal quality. I would much rather have a short match where both players are at the top of their game. I don't know, man. Like it's one that you're going to find a bunch of different opinions within the sport and people who watch it as well, is like, yes, physicality is an element to the game and you want to reward people that have put in a lot of work when it comes to stamina and strength. I just don't think that should be the overriding thing that occurs that separates players in our sport. I think it's much more of a game of skill than it is a game of endurance. And I will die with that opinion, even though I'm sure a lot of people disagree with it.
Yeah, and I maybe it's a product of my attention span as well, but I think when I was younger, I did associate length with greatness. And if something went 5 hours, it had to be good. But as I got older, I chose not to forget some terrible fourth sets in which maybe it was 6-4, but it took an hour and a half because both players were exceeding the time clock and getting as much out of the umpire's grace or lack of enforcing the rules as they could. But this match doesn't fall that way for me for obvious reasons. I think the narrative and the storyline is just huge. No one had ever come back from 2 sets down in the final to win at the Australian Open, Simon, which I thought was a bit astounding in hindsight. But that's what makes this so special. Like Rafa, I don't know what your expectations were for him coming into this year, but I think you did call him going back to number 1. Sorry, that was your bold claim. But I don't know how you safely said that after he was bedridden with COVID and had a foot that was barely hanging on. It was an amazing pick by you, but consider this. Medvedev wins this tournament. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying Vladimir Putin doesn't invade Ukraine afterwards based on this, because that would be, but what does his year look like? Because this was, by most accounts, a lost year for Danny. And I wonder if he wins this match, what does that mean? Lost year on court, sorry. I think off the court he had a kid and everything is great. But on the court, if he wins this slam, he's got 2 in a row, all the momentum in the world. He looks not invincible, but he's just beaten Novak and Rafa in back-to-back finals at a slam. Like, how much more impressive can you get? On the inverse, Rafa loses this match, maybe in straight sets. He had a good tournament, but clearly maybe there's something lacking that he's had in the past. And Australia serves as once again his boogeyman. Is he as confident heading into Roland Garros? Is he as dominant or the Rafa of old at that tournament? Maybe not. It's just there's so many things to think about of how this match could have gone at 2-3 love 40. And yet 6-4, 6-4, 7-5 later, 5 hours and 24 minutes later, 21st Grand Slam later, we have another iconic Rafa Nadal moment. And I think the crowd pop on match point said it all.
But it brings up 3 championship points.
Please.
It's the miracle in Melbourne.
Well, thank you very much for taking the opportunity to remind everyone that I did actually predict him getting back to world number 1 and winning 2 Grand Slams in 2022.
You did.
It's not even like broken clock situation. I was actually really confident in this one. It's one of those things I should have put money on. I felt it wasn't even a wild prediction. It was me thinking it was genuinely going to happen because I didn't think that he was going to end his career in the way that he had been bedridden with COVID and his body falling apart. I really genuinely felt like he had one more really big run in him and really wanted to cement himself as getting, 21, 22 and separating and giving himself some separation at the top of that list. I don't think I can say that as confidently in 2023. I really don't believe that's the case.
Yikes. I mean, the interesting part is that injuries continue to be a story for Rafa throughout the year. And when he played, he was quite good. But when he played was the question. And that's why I think 2023 is going to be a big question mark for him and where he's at. I mean, he's playing. He took 6 weeks off after Wimbledon. Had to leave Wimbledon, obviously, after aggravating his abdominal injury against Taylor Fritz. I mean, the US Open, it's hard to believe or hard to imagine him coming back to the heights he once achieved. But God, I've said that 8,000 times about this guy. Like, eventually we'll just stop doubting and say he is unlike anyone we've ever seen in this sport. And as an athlete as well, he's one of the few people that I've ever witnessed believing in himself to the point where it's not magical, but it feels like wizard-like, Bush. Like, it feels like someone is cast this aura. It's like magical realism come to life, where Rafa is like this figure that finds a way in the most just fantastic of fashions. I am on the record. I wasn't a huge Rafa guy ever, really. And seeing him in his later years grind and do things the hard way and push himself to the extent that at his personal well-being at sometimes, what's that mindset like? I would love to have a time to get into his brain to figure out what's going on. Cause it's just, you don't see that, Simon. You really don't.
I wish I could love anything as much as Rafael Nadal loves tennis. He is like, and I think that's the part that I find truly inspirational, is his genuine love and commitment to this one thing. Like, you've done everything, dude. Like, you have nothing left to prove. You had nothing left to prove 10 years ago, and you still continue to go out there and have to do the things necessary. And that comes, I think, from a real either sense of love of the sport or a real sense that you don't have anything else going on in your life. And I choose to believe it's probably the first one rather than the second one.
Rafa to end the year, obviously, he wins in Paris, which, again, just unreal. That
doesn't just win in Paris, just absolutely annihilates the field again.
Brutal. I mean, the Djokovic match in the quarters was for a 4-setter. Again, length isn't everything. Quite special. The Zverev match, one of the most unhinged tiebreaks ever in that first set, and then Zverev obviously shatters his ankle, and then Casper Ruud, who he's off-brand Rafa in some ways, and you could see that in the final, the way he easily dusted him. He makes the semis at Wimbledon, but he's hurt, and then at the US Open, he loses to Francis Tiafoe in the 4th round, clearly not at his peak. It's the story, the question mark I have for 2023 among the many is where he's going to be at. What's the plan? How much is he going to play? What's the goal? It's majors, obviously, but he's a family man. He's a father now. What's that all going to mean for Rafa next year? But maybe before we get to that, we can just cherish how special that Australian Open was, and the reaction from his box I thought was so cool. I think he lost 4 consecutive finals in the span of 8 years at this tournament. You could see the emotion pouring out. It was just really cool.
I guess in closing from this match and just on Rafael Nadal, our Discord was very lively during that French Open final, just purely on the basis that I think we were quite sure this was going to be it. That we were quite sure that just given how challenging it was at that part of the year, the foot injury, just everything, all the noises that were coming out of the camp from both Carlos Moya, from Uncle Tony, and from Rafael Nadal himself, we were almost certain that we were on the verge of hearing him say, like, that's it, in that French Open's winner's speech. Like, I've come back, I've done everything I needed to, and let's call it a day, just given how challenging it was with the foot. It didn't materialize. It didn't happen that way. He kept going. I have no idea what next year is going to look like. And I think that's absolutely fascinating from a narrative standpoint to see does this dude have it again? Does he really have one more run in him? Probably. And I think that's the biggest testament we can say to him.
Well, I know this quote from the man himself. I give it everything that I have inside. Believe me, I am super, super tired in all ways. I even can't celebrate. But was the day to give everything? No, I enjoyed. I enjoyed the fight. I enjoyed the emotions. At the end, have this trophy with me means everything. No, and it's the classic Rafa asking the questions that we all love to answer. What a player! What a moment! What a season for him! That's my favorite match of the year on the ATP side. When we come back, we hit the WTA for a bunch of matches that Simon and I really appreciated. Coming up next.
Welcome back to the Open Era podcast. It is our favorite matches of 2022. We've both taken turns going through our picks. Now it's time to share some mutual love, and we turn our attention to the WTA. One word, Devang. Ostrava.
Ostrava! 3 exclamation marks.
Not one, not two, but 3 exclamation marks. This is the best tournament of the year. And in a lot of ways, I think it actually probably did produce the best match of the year. It wasn't just the court. It wasn't just the exclamation marks. No, it was the presence of Iga Swiatek and Barbora Krejcikova playing out an all-time classic in a match that Iga Swiatek plays this match a million times. She probably wins this 900 and et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to finish that analogy because I can't be bothered. But just saying that she almost certainly should have won this, and it's kind of funny that she didn't.
Well, consider Barbora Krejcikova had won in Estonia the week before, beating Annette Kontaveit, the hometown kid there. She follows it up in Ostrava. And I will say, you mentioned Bush after the US Open, it gets a bit dicey on the tours and you don't know what you're going to see in terms of like who's turning up and who's still grinding out there. This swing for the WTA from like the end of September towards the end of October was pretty incredible. This tour was just incredible entertainment, wonderful viewing from week to week, but Tallinn and Ostrava and what Krejcikova was able to do, re-announcing herself in the singles world for some of us, really special. And yeah, I think I don't think we should praise her for turning up, but I feel like we should in some ways because of the year she had and the fact that she really didn't need to put it all on the line once again. But it's easier said than done when you're talking about high caliber athletes who have been molded for this. And the fact that she wasn't able to pull this out was one of the genuine shocks of the season.
I think I just need to take the L on this one, right? I need to stop being so ATP-centric in my mindset about who's phoning it in post the US Open because, like, it's good eating on the WTA side. And maybe this is just an ATP thing, that the tournaments and who shows up is just weaker post the US Open. It is not the case on the WTA side at all. And I mean, let's chat about Iga Swiatek's run to the final here. She gets Tomljanovic in the second round. Then she gets Katie McNally. That's not an easy one. Then gets Alexandrova, who had a great season and ran her incredibly close. And then gets Barbora Krejcikova in the final. Krejcikova, who's not seeded here as well, just gives some testament to the fact of how topsy-turvy her year was, especially not in doubles. Definitely not in doubles. Like, she had a banner year in the doubles side. But in singles, like, it has been a bit of a struggling second season following her maiden Grand Slam victory last year. Like, this was just a really fun final because we're both just huge fans of Krejcikova's game, just of how smooth she is around the court. And to see her go up against a player as formidable and having the year that Iga Swiatek did, it just produced some absolute firecrackers of rallies and just some incredible winners.
Really did. It's funny, we did the Iga episode last week and we talked about how special the season was and why it was so special, but the run to the final and then giving it everything against Krejcikova, we're lucky that she's at the top of the sport and the top of the game and such an amazing representative. But I think the depth of the WTA is something that it's so heavily underrated, and we're talking about it more, and we're obviously not the first people to mention that, but there can be multiple tournaments going on in different parts of the world that feature equally formidable draws. Like at this time in Tunisia, you had Elise Mertens beating Elise Cornet, but Ange Jabeur was there, obviously, at her hometown tournament. Like it's just a special time.
There's a ton of stuff that is worth pointing out about this match as well. The length, and as we mentioned in the last segment, length does not always equal a good match, but I think it does here. It's the longest match of Iga Swiatek's career. It's 3 hours and 16 minutes long. The first set, I think it might have been the longest first set of any match on the WTA side this year. I think it was 74 minutes in length. Like that is a long first set. And it, I think it's testament to the fighting spirits of both players to have it go the way it did. Like Krejcikova's down 5-1 in that first set and gets to 5-5 before Swiatek takes that first set. It lasts forever. And there's not a huge amount between the two of them in this match at all. And if we wanted to sort of circle one thing about what's the special sauce for this match, both players are just such strong all-court games. Like they're happy moving forward, backwards, side to side. They have a variety of shots. They can hit winners on either side. They're both adept with a drop shot. They're both extremely happy at the net. And I think just as a matchup, I'm just more than happy to watch both of these play again and again and again. And it's a bit of a shame that we don't get more of these two playing against each other.
I went to the tennis tournament in Toronto this year, and I was just walking around the grounds, and that's often when you can probably see some of the cooler stuff and some of the stuff that you won't be able to watch on TV. But I was able to see Krejcikova practicing. She was out there for 2.5 hours on like one of the hottest days of the summer, and she was going to play later. And we talk about Rafa loving tennis. This woman loves the crap out of this game, Bush. And I was so interesting watching what she was practicing, and there's consistency obviously and hitting with her hitting partner and focusing on special shots. But the level of focus she put into each rally, once again, these people are exceptional. Like it's really a marvel to watch them working their craft up close. And that was one of those pinch me moments where like, yeah, this is why this person is not only one of the best doubles players that we've seen in recent time, but she also is a hell of a singles player that has achieved some monumental things in that regard as well, who doesn't get the same kind of respect, I think, for being multifaceted the way she is.
We get tears on both sides of the nets at the conclusion of this match. We get Iga Swiatek pledging all of her prize money to a Polish non-profit for World Mental Health Day. We get the funny quote of basically Krejcikova saying, "I'm really sorry for today, but I'm really glad that I beat you." It's a great quote.
A classic quote.
A classic moment. And I think I would give one of the things that I think I've become more attuned to and I give much more respect to is just the solidity in someone's game. And I think Iga uses those words in her quote saying, "We didn't see a lot this season, but I'm happy that you're coming back. You have such solid tennis. It's pretty amazing. We need more players like you on the WTA." And I think that's one thing that I've become I give much more respect to players like, your Roberto Bautista Agut, where it's just like, holy shit, this person is difficult to beat. Like, it's just so damn solid and so damn tough. And I think Barbora Krejcikova falls in that category because she's not going to get anything free and not going to get anything easy from her. And that's got to be just a nightmare to know that anytime you step out on the court against it, you're not going to have an easy ride. And yeah, we need more players like her on tour.
Well said. The stat I read, it was the first final Iga had lost in more than 3 years. What?
That's right. Yeah. Some ridiculous number in a row, right? It's some really
10.
High enough. Yeah.
I mentioned Toronto, one of my favorites, Goff Sabalenka in Toronto. This is one of those ones, though, that was a length thing. It was an absolute slog. Again, really hot conditions. It was the longest match of Coco's career. I think against Putintseva, she went 2 hours and 57 minutes in Rome in 2021. This was 3 hours and 11 minutes. Not the first time they needed a third set tiebreak to decide a match between them. Coco Gauff did not play super well in this match. And it's weird possibly for me to put this here as one of my favorites because I think it is that reason. Bush, it's a youngster who is destined for phenomenal things, for great things, doing it the hard way, grinding it out when she doesn't have her best tools at her disposal against a very game Sabalenka, but also a meltdowny Sabalenka who did not do herself any favors when there were some chances to seize the opportunity.
Is there some element, maybe like a sneaky element, they're kind of similar players? Maybe that's, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into this as well. I mean, maybe Goff's slightly less power, but Goff has had moments to fall off and go off the boil as well in matchups. And we'll wait and see how that actually materializes. But like when these two play against each other, you know you're going to get fireworks. I mean, their matchups so far have been fun. It's not like we've had bad matches between each other at all. Like they played each other 3 times, and all 3 times it's been just entertaining. This is a good rivalry. I'm excited for this one moving forward because, you know, Sabalenka's got a really big 2023 to look forward to, just given her performance at the WTA finals, coming off a season where I think she rightfully probably believed that she would have been a Grand Slam champion, just given the retirement of Ash Barty as well. These two are going to be competing at the back end of Grand Slams in 2023. So it's kind of cool to look back at a matchup between the two of them, because I think we're going to be seeing this in more latter stages in the forthcoming season.
The other thing that's bang on, Bush, the other thing that sticks out, I think this match was on the grandstand, which I thought was interesting. Like it was intimate and interactive. The 6th and 10th seed, I thought they would have gotten center court billing, but a lot of Canadians still in the draw at that point, and it was relatively early in the tournament on Thursday. So that maybe explains where they were placed, but it also made for an electric atmosphere. And as you can hear from the way this one ended, it was pretty cool.
The wide serve again does the job. Boy, she's taken us the distance on this run to the quarterfinals, but the number 6 seed is ousted, and Coco Gauff takes her place in the last 8 after another Herculean effort. She might well have won it at least an hour earlier, but she milks the applause after winning the final set tiebreaker. Alison.
We leave the confines of Toronto and head back to the Australian Open for a round 3 matchup between Naomi Osaka and Amanda Anisimova. Dev, Naomi Osaka did play this season.
She did.
Unbelievable.
And this, I think I've overused the phrase sliding doors on this show, and I apologize, but I'm going to use it again because it's our dang show and I can do that. But holy hell, Bush, what happens if Naomi Osaka doesn't squander a bunch of match points in this match? What if she doesn't waste 2 and wins this 3rd round match after barely playing since the 2021 French Open? Because she didn't pull this off. She ends up leaving the top 80, and it's a sign of things to come. But not to get too hung up on the aftermath, the match itself was riveting, absolutely riveting. And it lends into your Australian Open, maybe produces the best tennis because everyone is fresh and everyone is still willing to, not willing, but everyone is still able to put everything out there. And I mean, who the hell knows what we're going to see from Naomi next year? I think at this time we were a lot more optimistic. I think I was, in terms of what was to come, but it felt like possibly this was a significant sign of what was to come in many ways.
I think there's also an element to this that we were, quote unquote, robbed of the Ashley Barty versus Naomi Osaka match in the 4th round, which is what everyone had circled on the draw when it came out, that we were going to get a meeting of these 2 heavyweights. And it didn't materialize that way. And it's kind of interesting looking back. Also, you mentioned the sliding doors, is that match may never happen again, even though you think it definitely will. But 2 players that it's going to be completely different elements of where they are in their careers. One is literally retired. One is kind of retired, I guess, in some capacity. Man, what could have been? This match itself was all over the place. And it was testament to the fact that we had no idea what Naomi Osaka was going to look like coming into this tournament in general. Like, I think all eyes were glued on that 1st round match against Osorio and against Madison Brengel as well, where she looked pretty damn good. Like, she looked back to her best. She's won this title before, and you really thought that she was going to go on a run here, like produce a magical run that we'd seen in years past. And then to get stopped the way that she did by not just a game Anisimova, but a player who had a really good start to the season, and was a worthy winner in this matchup.
It's well said. A few more that I have, Bush. Swiatek Kanepi from that same Australian Open.
Oh, what a match. That was amazing.
That was great. Danielle Collins doing her thing and stomping Iga in the semifinals was robbed us of a Barty Swiatek final in Australia, but full credit to Danielle for doing her thing. But that Kanepi Swiatek quarterfinal was exceptional. The St. Petersburg final, if you remember this one, Bush, Kontaveit Sakkari.
I do.
Poor Maria Sakkari, man. But that was a phenomenal match. And I think Annette Kontaveit had a really tough year with a lot of illnesses and COVID and changing her setup. And this was, I think, the peak for her in many ways. But that was a absolutely special match that I remember fondly. Kasatkina, Shelby Rogers in San Jose, I enjoyed a lot. That final, I mean, Daria Kasatkina, pretty special year for her in many ways. And then weirdly, I think this match kind of gets lost in the Bermuda Triangle that was Wimbledon this year because there were no points awarded and we had the ban going on. But Rybakina Jabeur final. I don't know if the quality was that high, but I felt maybe more nerves than I had felt in some time watching a tennis match for once.
I haven't watched that match back.
It's tough, man. It's tough viewing because it feels like it's just so meant to be about an hour in.
Really, really weird final, isn't it? Just all the things you mentioned, basically. I need to go back and watch it again because by all accounts, it is a terrific final. Like there's lots of good drama in it. I feel so bad for Ons though. Yeah. She will get there, right? Surely she'll get there.
I think so. I mean, these are one of the things I want to see in 2023 is Maria Sakkari win a big final and Ons Jabeur get a Grand Slam. I think that's on the list for me in terms of hoping, and getting Ash Barty Swiatek when Barty inevitably comes back is another thing that I'm hoping for.
Still going on that, right? You're still holding true.
Do you have any more before we wrap up?
Not at the top of my head, no. It's been a good year, though, like in terms of matches. And the one point that I was going to make in closing is I think the ATP has actually done a really good job of this. They have I believe it's an 8-part summary of the best matches of 2022 on YouTube that you can just go back and watch in a row where they've done a bunch of the selections for you. It's a good watch. If you have the time and your slippers on by the fireplace over the New Year's period, over Christmas, some good tennis in there, and I encourage you to watch it.
I'm going to shout out 2 final ones, Bush, for some Canadian content, some CanCon, as they say in this neck of the woods. Leylah Fernandez, Camila Osorio in Monterrey was a ridiculous final. Leylah took that 6-7, 6-4, 7-6. Camila Osorio features in a lot of these best matches of the year because of her play style and the way she produces just some exceptional, I don't want to say grit, but like just exceptional tactics and ability in big moments to grind and to figure out ways to compete. But that was a great match. And I think Felix against Holger Rune to end the year, which was in, how good is my memory? It was in Basel. A good field. Alcaraz was there. RBA was there. Wawrinka was there, but Holger Rune would end up beating Novak at the end of the year, which is a big moment for him. But Felix running off these tournaments in a row, but also beating Holger Rune in Switzerland was a big deal.
Styles make fights, as they say in boxing, and I think it's also true within the tennis world as well. At some point, and maybe this is a question that we can leave off just on the basis of this is an episode about our favorite matches of 2022, is there players who have styles that just make for really, really good matches? Because you remember, you mentioned Camila Osorio, and I completely agree with you. She just has a play style which brings out the best in her opponent. I wonder if there are other players like that, and what is the makeup for someone to be just a fun watch in that regard? It's a really good question, and I'm curious to know the answer that if our listeners have it.
Another final shout out, and this is mainly for Owen Lewis, friend of the show, but Sarah Sorribes Tormo probably has 5 or 6 of the match of the year candidates in here as well. Phenomenal player to watch. What a year, what a season, Bush. Any final closing thoughts as we wrap up this week's show?
Let's do it all again in 2023, Dev. More matches, more Rafa Nadal comebacks, I'm sure, and another return to world number 1. It's on the cards. You heard it here first.
Amazing. I'm excited for 2023, and not because of the Netflix show that we got some more details about, which I'm sure will be a topic of conversation in January. But yeah, it's Australia time very soon, and we'll do it all again. And can't wait to watch a smorgasbord of live tennis in the near future. That'll be it for today's show. A reminder, we are on patreon.com/open era. Simon mentioned our wonderful Discord. So many wonderful moments in there, watching these matches together and crying and laughing and yelling together. It's a wonderful place. It's wonderful people. So highly recommend you join us on patreon.com/open era. You join us there. You get the show ad free. You get it early on Sundays. Plus you get that access to the Discord where we're chatting tennis all the time. We're also on Twitter at Open Era Pod. Also on YouTube these days, if you are a fan of that medium and want to listen to it at work or whatever. It's via Soda, our parent company. So search them on YouTube and you can find our latest shows there. And a rating or a review, wherever you get this podcast, would be wonderful for us. I think we just made 700 followers on Twitter, Bush, whatever that means on Twitter anymore, but really cool. As always, thanks for the support. It means a lot. We love doing the show and getting to interact with all of you throughout the year. For producer Dylan on the ones and twos, and for Simon, thank you so much for listening to Open Era. We'll talk to you soon.